My name is Gerald. I am 63 years old. And the last thing I remember before everything went dark was the sound of metal crushing against metal, glass exploding around me like 1,000 tiny stars, and then silence. A silence so deep and so complete that I thought, for just a moment, that I had died. I hadn't died. But what happened next, what happened in that hospital room over the following 7 days, made me wish, more than once, that maybe it would have been easier if I had. My wife left me, alone, in that hospital bed, with tubes in my arm and a machine breathing for me. She walked out of those doors and she did not answer a single one of my calls for 7 full days. 7 days. And when she finally came back, when she finally walked through those hospital doors again and asked the nurse at the front desk, "Is my husband still here?" That nurse looked her dead in the eyes and said something that changed everything. Something my wife never saw coming. Something none of them saw coming. Because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that everything that was happening was all part of my plan. Stay with me, because this story is going to take you somewhere you do not expect. Part 2, Who I Am and the Life I Built. Let me tell you who I am before I tell you what happened to me. I grew up with very little. My father was a factory worker in a small town in Ohio. My mother cleaned houses for families richer than ours. We didn't have much, but we had something that money cannot buy: dignity. My father used to say, "Gerald, a man who keeps his dignity keeps everything. A man who loses it has nothing left, no matter how full his pockets are." I carried those words my entire life. I worked from the time I was 15 years old, mowed lawns, delivered newspapers, stocked shelves at a grocery store on Friday nights, while other kids my age were at football games. I never complained, I just worked, because I had a dream, a simple dream that felt enormous to a boy like me. I wanted a home, a real home with a family inside it. That was everything I ever wanted. I met my wife, Carol, when I was 24. She was 22, studying to become a school teacher. She had this laugh, Lord, she had this laugh that could fill up a whole room and make everyone in it feel warm. I fell in love with that laugh before I fell in love with anything else about her. We got married after 2 years of dating. Simple wedding, small church, maybe 40 people, but those 40 people loved us, and that was more than enough. We had our son, Michael, 2 years later. Michael, even saying his name right now is complicated. Michael was a good boy growing up. Quiet, smart, he got good grades. He played baseball in the backyard with me on Sunday afternoons. He used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long car rides, and I would drive the extra long way home just to get a few more minutes of holding him like that. Because that's what fathers do. You hold on to those moments because somewhere deep inside you, you know they won't last forever. I worked hard for 35 years. Started as a maintenance technician at a manufacturing plant. Worked my way up to floor supervisor. Never missed a day of work. Saved every extra dollar I could. And when Michael was in college, when he needed tuition money his 3rd year because his scholarship had a gap, I didn't hesitate. I pulled from my retirement savings. Didn't tell him how much it hurt the plan Carol and I had for our future. Just handed him the check and said, "Get your degree, son. That's all that matters." He got his degree. He became an engineer. He married a woman named Brittany. Brittany, that's where everything started to change. I want to be fair to Brittany. I want to be careful here, because I am not the kind of man who blames one person for everything. Life is never that simple, but I will say this. From the moment Brittany entered our family, something shifted. Slowly at first. The way seasons change, you don't notice it happening. But then one day you look up and summer is completely gone. In the beginning, she was polite to me, polite to Carol. She came to dinners, she smiled, She said the right things, but there was always something behind those eyes of hers. A measuring, a calculating, like she was constantly adding up what Michael had and what she wanted more of. Michael was doing well financially. They had a nice house in a good suburb, 2 cars, vacations twice a year. And still, it never seemed like quite enough for Brittany. About 3 years into their marriage, things started changing with Michael, too. He stopped calling as often. Sunday afternoon baseball in the backyard became a memory. When they came for the holidays, Brittany always had somewhere else they needed to be after just a couple of hours. "We can't stay long, Gerald," she would say, always Gerald, never Dad, never even a warmer version of my name. Just Gerald, like I was a neighbor she barely knew. And Michael, my Michael, he would just nod along. Whatever Brittany said, Michael agreed with. I watched my son disappear, little by little, into a version of himself I didn't recognize. I didn't say anything, because that's who I am. I don't make scenes. I don't demand. I raised my son to be his own man, and if this was the man he was choosing to be, then the most dignified thing I could do was love him quietly and wait. Carol was different. Carol started to change too, but in a direction I never expected. You see, Carol had always wanted more than what we had. Not more love, we had plenty of that. More things. More status. More of what she saw other people having. It was a quiet ache in her that I had always known about, always loved her through. But as the years passed, and Brittany started filling Carol's head with ideas about what our retirement should look like, about what kind of lifestyle we deserved, Carol started looking at me differently, like I had failed her somehow, like the home I built, the life I worked for, the 35 years of never missing a day of work. It wasn't quite enough. I would hear them sometimes, Carol and Brittany, on the phone, long conversations I was never meant to be part of. And sometimes, if I walked past at the wrong moment, I would catch pieces of it. "He's just so content with so little, Carol. Doesn't that bother you? Michael says we should look into his retirement fund. He says there's more there than Gerald lets on. You deserve better than this, Carol. You really do." I would hear these things, and I would walk back to my chair in the living room, sit down, pick up my newspaper, and say nothing. Because I had a plan. I just didn't know yet how soon I would need to use it. It was a Tuesday in November. Early morning, the kind of cold that gets into your bones before you've even had your coffee. I was driving to the hardware store. Just a regular errand. I needed wood screws and a new set of brushes for a painting project in the garage. Nothing dramatic, just a Tuesday. The other driver ran a red light. That's what the police report said later. Ran a red light at 40, 5 miles per hour, and hit the driver's side of my truck with everything he had. I remember the impact. I remember the glass. I remember thinking about Carol, her face, her laugh, in that half second when time does that strange thing and slows almost to a stop. And then darkness. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later. There were tubes. There was beeping. There was a ceiling I didn't recognize, and a pain in my chest that felt like someone had parked a truck on top of me, which, in a manner of speaking, they had. 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, a head laceration that took 14 stitches, internal bruising the doctor described as significant and concerning. And Carol, where was Carol? She was there. When I first opened my eyes, she was there, sitting in the chair by the window, looking at her phone. "Carol," I said. My voice came out like gravel. She looked up. "Oh, you're awake." Not, "Thank God." Not, "Baby, I was so scared." Just, "Oh, you're awake." I should have noticed it then. That flatness in her voice, that distance. But I was drugged and broken and confused. And I told myself it was just shock. People handle fear in different ways. Maybe this was how Carol was handling it. "How long have I been out?" I asked. 2 days, she said. "The doctor says you're stable. Thank you for being here. I said. She nodded once. Looked back at her phone. That night, she told me she needed to go home. She needed to rest. She said she would come back tomorrow. She did not come back tomorrow. I want you to understand something about being alone in a hospital bed when you are 60, 3 years old and broken. It is a very specific kind of loneliness. You lie there in the dark, and the machines beep, and somewhere down the hall someone is coughing, and you stare at the ceiling, and you think about your whole life. Every choice, every morning you got up early, every dollar you saved, every moment you swallowed your pride and kept walking forward because you had people depending on you. And you think, does any of it matter? Did I do it right? Did the people I did it for, do they even know? I called Carol on the second day. Voicemail. I called her on the third day. Voicemail. I called Michael. His phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message. He didn't call back. I called Brittany's number, something I had never done in my life, because she had made it clear in 100 subtle ways that she didn't want me reaching out to her directly. It rang twice and went to voicemail, but here's the thing about a voicemail that goes quiet at 2 rings. That means someone pressed the button. Someone held that phone, saw my name on the screen, and chose not to answer. 7 days. 7 days in that hospital room with the beeping machines and the kind nurses who brought me Jell-O cups and asked if I had family coming to visit. My wife is coming, I told them, on the first day, on the third day, on the 5th day. She's just busy. She'll be here. On the 6th day, a nurse named Darlene sat down beside my bed during her break. She had gray hair and warm eyes, and the kind of face that has seen too much to be shocked by anything. "Mr. Gerald," she said, "is there anyone else we can call? A friend, another family member?" I looked at her, and something about the gentleness in her question, the way she wasn't judging me, wasn't pitying me, was just asking a plain and honest question, something about it cracked me open a little. "No," I said, "there's just Carol." Darlene nodded slowly. "Well," she said, "you've got us, and you're doing better every day. That counts for something." It did count for something. I held on to it, but here's the thing. Here's what none of them knew. What Carol didn't know. What Michael didn't know. What Brittany, sitting in her nice house, pressing the button to send my call to voicemail, definitely didn't know. I wasn't just lying in that bed being sad. I was thinking, I was remembering, and I was finalizing a plan I had started putting together 6 months before that accident ever happened. And this is where I need you to stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you changes everything you think you know about this story. 6 months before the accident, I had visited my doctor for a routine checkup, and my doctor, a serious, careful man named Dr. Ellison, had sat me down and told me something that changed the way I saw everything. My heart was not well. Not a heart attack, not immediately dangerous, but a condition, a progressive one, that Dr. Ellison said needed to be taken seriously. He said I needed to reduce stress significantly. He said I needed to make some important decisions about my future, about arrangements, about what I wanted my life to look like in the next 5 to 10 years. I went home that night and I sat in my garage for 2 hours by myself, and in those 2 hours, something became very clear to me. I had spent 40 years taking care of people, and not one of those people, not Carol, not Michael, not anyone, had ever asked me what I needed, what I wanted, what I was afraid of. I had watched over the past several years as my wife grew distant, as my son became a stranger, as the daughter-in-law I had welcomed into my family quietly worked to separate me from everything I had built. And I understood something. If I died tomorrow, if my heart gave out on a Tuesday morning, they would come. They would come to the funeral. They would sit in the front row and cry. And then they would go to the lawyer's office and find out what I had left behind. And that would be the thing that mattered most to them. Not me, not Gerald, not the man who scraped lawns and skipped sleep and pulled from his retirement so his son could finish college. The money, so I made a decision. 6 months before that accident, I hired a lawyer, a quiet, careful woman named MS. Patterson, who came highly recommended by a friend of mine from the plant. And I sat in her office, and I told her what I wanted to do. I restructured everything, the house, the retirement accounts, the small investment portfolio I had built over 30 years of careful, boring, methodical saving. The life insurance policy, I moved everything quietly, legally, completely into a trust, not in Carol's name, not in Michael's name, in the name of a foundation I established myself, a small foundation dedicated to providing college scholarships to kids from low-income families in our town. Kids like the boy I used to be, kids with big dreams and empty pockets. I also made a new will. The new will left Carol a fair and reasonable amount, enough to live comfortably, to keep her dignity, to never struggle. But the rest, the bulk of what I had spent a lifetime building, went to that foundation. And then I left one more instruction with MS. Patterson, an instruction about the hospital. You see, I had been having some troubling symptoms for a few months before the accident. Nothing certain, nothing diagnosed, but enough that I had quietly informed Dr. Ellison, and enough that I had spoken to MS. Patterson about a specific scenario. The instruction was this: if I was ever hospitalized and my family failed to appear, failed to respond, abandoned me in that bed, MS. Patterson was to wait exactly 7 days, and then she was to come to the hospital herself, and she was to bring the documents. Carol walked through those hospital doors on the morning of the 8th day. I know because Nurse Darlene told me later exactly what happened at the front desk. Carol walked in. She was wearing a nice coat, the beige one she saves for occasions. Her hair was done. She had her purse on her arm. And she walked up to the front desk and she asked, in a voice that Darlene described as somewhere between casual and impatient, "Is my husband still here? Gerald Mercer, room 114. Darlene looked at her. And Darlene, God bless this woman, who had watched me lie in that room for 7 days calling a phone that no one answered, who had sat beside my bed and asked if there was anyone else to call, who had brought me Jell-O cups and warm blankets, and the quiet dignity of being treated like a human being. Darlene looked Carol straight in the eyes and said, "He is, but you should know, ma'am, he has a visitor already." Carol blinked. "A visitor? Yes, ma'am. She arrived about 20 minutes ago. She's in with him now." I can only imagine what went through Carol's mind in that moment. 20 minutes, a woman, in her husband's hospital room. She walked quickly down that hallway. She pushed open the door to room 114, and she found me sitting up in that bed, more upright than I had been in days, stronger than I had felt all week, sitting across from a very composed, very professional woman in a gray blazer, who had papers spread across the bedside tray table. Carol stopped in the doorway. "Gerald," she started. "Carol," I said. My voice was steady. I had practiced being steady. "Who is this?" Carol asked. "This is MS. Patterson," I said. "My attorney." The silence that followed was the loudest silence I have ever heard in my life. Carol stepped into the room slowly. She looked at MS. Patterson. She looked at the papers, and something shifted in her face, some understanding beginning to dawn, though she didn't yet know the shape of it. "Why is your attorney here?" Carol asked carefully. "Because I asked her to be," I said. "Sit down, Carol." She sat. MS. Patterson calmly gathered the papers. She had already walked me through the final signed copies of everything, and she placed them into her briefcase with a quiet, professional click. "Gerald," Carol started again. "Let me say something first," I said. "Please." She stopped. I took a breath. 3 broken ribs. Every breath still cost me something. But I looked at my wife, this woman I had loved for nearly 40 years, and I found the words I needed. I woke up in this room 8 days ago. I said, I had tubes in me. I could barely breathe. And the first thing I did, when I had enough sense to reach for that phone, was call you. She opened her mouth. I continued. You didn't answer. For 7 days you didn't answer. Michael didn't answer. I lay in this bed alone and I thought about our whole life, every year of it, and I asked myself a question I should have asked a long time ago. Carol's eyes were glistening now. I didn't let that stop me. I asked myself, do the people I love, do they love me back? Not the me that writes the checks. Not the me that fixed the house and paid the tuition and never asked for anything in return. Do they love Gerald, the man, the 63-year-old man lying in this hospital bed with nobody coming? A tear ran down Carol's cheek. I was going to come, she said quietly. I just needed some time. 7 days, Carol. The words landed like something solid in the room. Gerald, Brittany told you not to come, didn't she? It wasn't a question. Carol flinched, and that flinch told me everything I needed to know. She said, Carol stopped, started again. She said you were stable. She said the doctors had everything under control. She said if we came running, it would look like we were. She stopped herself again. Look like you were what? I asked. Carol looked down at her hands, like we were worried about the will. She whispered. I let those words sit in the air between us for a long moment. So Brittany thought. I said slowly that if you rushed to my bedside while I was in critical condition, it would look like you were only doing it for the money. She said you were dramatic sometimes. She said you would use it against her, against Michael, and you believed her. Carol's chin trembled. I didn't know what to believe. You believed her over 40 years of marriage, Carol. You believed a woman who has been in our family for 7 years, over 40 years of me, never once giving you a reason not to trust me. I wasn't angry. I want to be clear about that. I was not angry. I was sad, deeply, bone-achingly sad. The kind of sad that sits at the bottom of your chest like a stone. What are those papers? Carol asked finally. She nodded toward M.S. Patterson's briefcase. Those, I said, are the papers that explain what happens to everything I've built. Everything I've spent my whole life working for. Carol's breath caught. Gerald, it's already done, Carol. The signatures are witnessed. It's been filed. There's nothing to undo. What did you... She couldn't finish the sentence. I'll tell you everything. And then Michael is going to come here, because I've already called him this morning and told him he needs to come, and I'm going to tell you all together. He's coming. He called back this time, I said quietly. Funny how that works. He came within the hour, my son, 40 years old, and still wearing the expression he used to have when he was a teenager, and he had done something wrong, but hadn't figured out how to apologize for it yet. Brittany was not with him. He had come alone. He walked into that room and he looked at me, really looked at me, and something happened in his face, like a man seeing something clearly for the first time after a long time of choosing not to look. Dad, he said, just that, just Dad. Sit down, son. I said. He sat beside Carol. He took her hand. She was crying quietly now. He looked like he might start himself. I'm sorry, he said. Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have been here. I don't have a good excuse. I don't have any excuse. No, I agreed. You don't. He nodded, accepted that. Is that? He glanced at M.S. Patterson. Is that your lawyer? Yes. Did you change the will? He asked it straight. I respected him for that, at least. No dancing around it. I changed more than the will. I said. I changed everything. About 6 months ago. Michael's jaw tightened. 6 months. He stopped. Before the accident. Long before the accident. The accident had nothing to do with it. I had already decided. Decided what? I told them all of it. The heart condition, Dr. Ellison's warning, the long night in the garage where I sat alone and understood something true about my life, the lawyer, the trust, the foundation. I told them about the scholarship fund, about the kids it would help, about the boy I used to be. I watched their faces as I talked. Carol's expression moved through shock, through grief, through something that I think was understanding, or the beginning of it. Michael's face was harder to read. I saw hurt there. I saw the complicated machinery of a man recalculating things he thought he knew. You're leaving it all to a scholarship fund, he said finally. Not all of it. I said, your mother is provided for. Fully, she will never struggle. I made sure of that. But you, Michael, I need you to hear me. This is not punishment. This is not me being cruel or vindictive or using money as a weapon. Lord knows I've seen what using money as a weapon does to a family. I won't be that man. Then why? Because you don't need it. I said simply, you have a career, a good income, a house, everything you need. What you need, what both of you need, has nothing to do with money. I leaned forward, and my ribs reminded me sharply that leaning forward was not my best idea. I did it anyway. What you both need is to understand something about who I am, who I have always been. I am not a bank. I am not a retirement fund you check on when you need a withdrawal. I am a man. I am your father. I am your husband. And I spent 40 years loving both of you with everything I had, quietly, without demanding anything back, and I want you to know that I don't regret a single day of it. My voice broke then, just slightly. I pulled it back. But I also want you to know what it felt like to lie in this bed and reach for that phone and hear silence. 7 days of silence. From the people I gave my life to. The room was very quiet. Carol was crying fully now, not bothering to hide it. Michael had his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands. She came that evening. No one had told her to come. Michael must have called her. She walked in wearing the same measuring expression she always wore, but there was something different underneath it, something. Almost frightened, she looked at the room, at Carol's swollen eyes, at Michael's hunched shoulders, at me, upright in the bed, watching her with the steady gaze of a man who has nothing left to fear. Gerald, she said. Brittany, I said. She hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw it, the exact moment when a person realizes that the thing they were afraid of has already happened, and all the maneuvering in the world will not change it. I want to say something to you, she said. She sat down in the chair near the door, like she wasn't sure she had the right to come any closer. And I want to say it honestly. I waited. I have not been kind to you, she said. I have told myself stories about why, that you were too controlling, that you held too much over Michael, that Carol deserved more than she had. I told myself those stories, so I didn't have to look at the real one. And what is the real one? I asked. She looked at her hands. The real story is that I was afraid of you, she said. Not afraid like, not physically. I was afraid of how much Michael loved you, how much Carol loved you. I was afraid that I would always be on the outside of that, and I didn't know how to handle it except to make the circle smaller. The room was completely silent. I told Carol not to come to the hospital. She continued. I told her you were fine. I said. She stopped, pressed her lips together, started again. I said some things about what it would look like. About the money, I was wrong. That was wrong. And when Michael wanted to call you back, you told him not to. I said. She nodded, very small, very ashamed. Michael made a sound beside her, not a word, just a sound. The sound of someone absorbing something painful. Brittany, I said. She looked up at me. I forgive you, I said. She blinked, like I had spoken in a language she didn't expect. I forgive you, I said again, not because what you did was small, not because it didn't hurt. It hurt more than these broken ribs, and that is saying something. But because I am not willing to spend whatever time I have left carrying hatred for anyone. Life is too short and too precious for that. I've known that for longer than you've been alive. Her eyes filled. I don't deserve that, she said. No, I agreed. You don't. But I'm giving it to you anyway, because that's the kind of man I am. And I need you to understand the difference between the kind of man I am and the kind of people some of you chose to be this week. That landed hard. I meant it to, not cruelly but clearly. Some things need to be said clearly. I'm not changing the documents. I said, that's not what this is about. The foundation stands, the trust stands. What I'm asking from all of you is something that costs nothing and is worth everything. I looked at each of them, Carol, Michael, Brittany. I'm asking you to see me. Just see me, not what I have, not what I might leave behind. Me, Gerald, the man who loves you. Can you do that? I spent 4 more days in that hospital, and in those 4 days, something shifted. Carol came every morning. She brought my favorite coffee in a thermos from home and sat beside me and talked. Really talked, the way we used to talk when we were young and had nothing but each other and time. She told me about her fears, about the loneliness she had been carrying, about how Brittany's voice had slowly replaced her own inner voice over the years, and how she hadn't noticed it happening until she was standing in my hospital room doorway, looking at a lawyer's briefcase and realizing she didn't recognize herself anymore. I lost myself somewhere, she said to me on the 3rd morning. I know, I said, so did I, for a while. But I found my way back. You can too. Michael came every evening after work. He didn't always say much. Sometimes he just sat there, but he was there and that counted. On the 2nd evening he told me something he had never told me before, that he had always been scared that he would disappoint me, that he had let Brittany become the loudest voice in his life partly because it was easier than measuring himself against a father he admired and feared never being enough for. I held my son's hand and I told him something true. Michael, you have never once disappointed me. Not once. I was never measuring you. I was just loving you. That's all I ever knew how to do. He cried that night, a grown man of 40, crying in a hospital room, and I let him, because some tears need to be cried. Brittany did not come back to the hospital, but she sent something through Michael, a handwritten letter, 2 pages long. I won't share the details of that letter because some things belong between people, but I will say this. She meant it. I could tell she meant it, and that was enough to begin with. They brought me home on a Thursday. Carol drove. Michael sat in the back seat. When we pulled into the driveway, my driveway, the driveway of the house I had built piece by piece over 30 years, I sat for a moment and just looked at it. The old oak tree in the front yard that I had planted as a sapling when Michael was 3 years old. Now it was massive, spreading, throwing shade over half the lawn, standing there like a witness to everything that had ever happened in this family. You all right, Dad? Michael asked from the back seat. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I'm all right. Inside, Carol had made my favorite meal, pot roast mashed potatoes, the green beans I like with the little bits of bacon. She had set the table properly with the good plates, candles. She didn't say anything about it, just brought it to the table and sat across from me like we had done 10,000 times before, and handed me the serving spoon and said, "Eat before it gets cold, Gerald." And I laughed. I hadn't laughed in nearly 2 weeks. I laughed and it hurt my ribs, and I didn't care even slightly. I want to tell you now completely, fully about the plan, because here's what you need to understand. The plan was never really about the money. It was never about punishing anyone. It was never about winning. The plan was this. I knew my heart wasn't well. I knew my time might be shorter than I had imagined. And I knew, with the quiet, clear-eyed knowledge of a man who has been watching people for 63 years, that something was wrong in my family. Something had been wrong for a long time. And if I died without addressing it, without being honest about it, without forcing a moment of reckoning, then I would leave behind a family that was broken and didn't even fully understand why. The trust and the foundation were real. They are still real. I am not changing them. But the instruction I gave M.S. Patterson, the instruction about waiting 7 days and then coming to the hospital, that was deliberate, carefully deliberate. I needed to know the truth, not what they said. What they did, because actions are the only honest language people have, and I had spent too many years listening to words. I needed to know when things were hard, when I was broken and helpless, and had nothing to offer anyone, would they come? The answer told me everything I needed to know, and I used that truth not to destroy them, but to finally, after all these years, have a real conversation with the people I loved. For the first time in longer than I could remember, we were honest with each other, all of us, about the fear and the loneliness and the disappointment and the love that had always been there, buried under layers of silence and misunderstanding and one woman's careful, fearful maneuvering. That conversation, that painful, necessary, healing conversation, that was the plan. The foundation is real. The scholarship fund is real. Next spring, the first 4 students will receive their scholarships. I have already met 2 of them, a girl named Simone who wants to be an architect, a boy named Devant who wants to study environmental science. They remind me of myself at their age, hungry and hopeful and willing to work. That is my legacy, and I am at peace with it. I am going to tell you the lesson I carry from all of this, not because I think you need to be taught something. You are adults, you have your own wisdom, but because this is what I know in my bones. After 63 years and a car crash and 7 days of silence and everything that followed, the people in your life are not permanent. I know that sounds obvious. We all know it intellectually, but we don't live like we know it. We take people for granted, their presence, their patience, their quiet love. We take it for granted the way we take air for granted, and we only notice it when it's suddenly difficult to breathe. The man in your life who never asks for anything, notice him. The woman who just keeps going, keeps showing up, keeps loving without demanding, see her, really see her, before she stops. Money is not love. I have watched families destroy themselves over money, watched children become strangers to their parents over inheritance, watched marriages crack apart on the fault line of financial expectation. Money is a tool, nothing more. It cannot tell you that you matter. It cannot sit beside your hospital bed at 3 in the morning. It cannot laugh with you. It cannot forgive you. Do not let money be the language of your family. Let love be the language of your family. Even when, especially when love is hard, silence is not weakness. I was quiet for a long time. People mistook that for passivity, for submission, for a man who could be overlooked. But silence, when it is chosen, when it is the silence of a man who is watching and understanding and preparing, silence is not weakness. It is patience. And patience, in the end, has a way of revealing the truth about everything and everyone. Forgiveness is not for the person who wronged you. It is for you. When I told Brittany I forgave her, I meant it completely, not because she earned it, but because forgiveness is the only thing that frees you from the weight of what was done to you. Hatred is heavy. I have enough to carry with my broken ribs. I don't need hatred on top of it. Choose forgiveness. It is the most powerful choice you can make. And finally this, never let anyone make you doubt your worth. I am 63 years old. I worked for 35 years. I loved with everything I had. I was not perfect. No man is, but I was honest, and I was faithful, and I got up every single morning and tried my best. That matters. That counts. Not because anyone acknowledged it. Not because anyone gave me a trophy for it. It counts because I know it, because I did it, because the oak tree in my front yard is 27 feet tall, and it got that way 1 year at a time. Do not let the people who overlook you convince you that you are not worth seeing. You are worth seeing. I am home now. My ribs are healing. The doctor says my heart is holding steady. Carol makes my coffee in the morning and brings it to my chair without being asked, and we sit together and watch the light come up over the backyard, and we don't always say a lot. We don't need to. Michael calls every Sunday. We talk for a while. Sometimes about nothing, sometimes about everything. It is enough. Brittany came to dinner last month. She sat at my table and ate Carol's pot roast and told me about a project she's working on, and asked my opinion about something, genuinely asked, and listened to what I said. It is not a perfect family. No family is. But it is honest now, and honest is worth more than perfect. The first Scholarship awards go out in 3 months. Simone and Devant and 2 others. I have framed their photographs and put them on the wall in my garage, next to the old photo of my father at the factory where he worked. I look at those photographs sometimes when I'm working on something out there, and I think, this is what it was all for. Not the house, not the accounts, not any of it. This. The look on a young person's face when someone tells them, you matter, your dreams matter. Someone who doesn't even know you believes in you enough to invest in your future. That is everything. That is the whole point. My name is Gerald. I am 63 years old. I survived a car accident and 7 days of silence and a reckoning that cracked my family open like a walnut and let the light in. And I would do it all again, because love, real love, earned love, love that costs you something, is always worth it. Always. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone in your life you might be taking for granted, please share it. Leave a comment below telling me about the person in your life who loves quietly, who gives without asking, who deserves to be seen. And if you're new here, if this is the first story of mine you've found, please subscribe. Every week I bring you stories like this one, real, human, from the heart. Until next time, be kind to the quiet people in your life. They are often the ones holding everything together. God bless you.